sighting here on the 13th of March. Weird happenings in the skies over Phoenix recently. And no one seems to be able to explain what it was. And now,
suddenly 6 amber orbs in a row, totally equidistant from each other, massive span across, pop up.
They saw strange lights, series of strange bright lights seen over the skies of Arizona. Gets a lot of people wondering what the heck.
There's going to be a time where they're not going to be able to hide it anymore.
The availability of witnesses was extraordinary.
There are another 10,000 Arizonans who saw the same thing.
Eyewitnesses who saw it say it's like nothing they've ever seen before.
Many investigators call it the largest sighting ever, lasting the longest amount of time seen by the largest number of people.
The data speaks for itself. Plus, I have photographs that cannot be explained or denied.
Shortly after 8 p.m., hundreds, maybe thousands of Arizonans reported seeing a triangular-shaped object with three
thousands of people saw more than stars in the night sky.
The mystery remains unsolved and controversial.
There was nothing there but blackness and these 3 amber orbs. The top orbs started to dim as if on a dimmer switch. It didn't budge at all.
The people who saw the lights will say the lights were orange, they were bright, and they were big, and they were like nothing they've ever seen before. And there's been no official explanation.
This didn't look like anything I'd ever seen in my life. I don't believe they're flare. I don't believe they're conventional aircraft. I don't believe they're the military testing top secret craft.
Ultimately, it's going to be the people that will sort these things out rather than the government.
The bigger question is not, is there a phenomenon, but what is this phenomenon?
I'm learning that this is happening worldwide. What's going on here? What is this?
And good morning from Philadelphia. Frank here.
James coming in from Westchester, New York.
And this is UFO News Network Sunday. We've got with us today Dr. Lynne Kitei, and she's going to tell us all about the Phoenix Light case. One of the really amazing cases where an entire community got up in arms. And it seems like cases like this maybe come up once a decade. I would say Stephenville was the most recent. That was 2008, 10 years ago already. We are due for another one. Phoenix Lights in the 90s, going back to the 80s, Hudson Valley in the 60s, cases up in Michigan. But this is one of those once-a-decade kinds of cases. And Dr. Lynne, you were right in the middle of all this. Tell us, and you're still in the middle of all this, still keeping this case going, still disseminating information about what happened 21 years ago already. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with how you got into it all, or do you want to start talking about the case?
Absolutely. Well, actually, both are intertwined because, and by the way, thank you so much, Frank and James, for having me share this information, which, by the way, even UFO experts and colleagues, unless you've read the book, The Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone, that took over 7 years to in the making after the mass sighting in 1997 for me to come forward. I did not want to come forward, and we'll talk about that. There's so much more to the story that people have not heard. I felt it was really imperative to share the data as it unfolded. And the story itself is really fascinating. But for myself, going back to 1995, I had no interest or knowledge in this topic at all. In fact, I stayed away from it. I was very busy. My life's work, not only as a medical doctor since 1976, but I focused not only in family practice, internal medicine, and adolescent medicine, but on medical communications, because I felt it was important to get information out to the public, which I've been doing now for over 40 years on vital health issues actually started in Philadelphia, Frank, at KYW at the NBC affiliate with the stellar team of Jessica Savage and Mort Krim and Vince Leonard, actually a pioneer in the field. Nobody was doing this then, but I started doing health reporting. I saw the need to really let the public know about this vital issues, health issues, and a syndication grew from that, which when we moved to Phoenix in 1980, and this is all building up to the Phoenix Lights, by the way, they were already showing the syndication here in Phoenix, which was really exciting. And then NBC here asked me to do a health reporting segments for them on the news, and then USA Cable. So by the mid 80s, not only was I very versed because I was doing everything myself, as far as researching and writing and going out in the field and shooting the pieces and going back and editing them at the station, and then being on set with whoever, whether it was Jessica Savage or whoever the host would be, and answering questions. By the mid 80s, I was also seeing kids in the practice, adolescents who were drowning in substance abuse, and wanted to do something really productive to wake them up to the reality. And I got experts in the field, the celebrities, because my other hat before I went to medical school, which is part of this whole story, that was actually professional musical theater on Broadway. I toured with Gordon McRae in Oklahoma, and Betty Grable and Guys and Dolls, and understudied Barbara Eden in Sound of Music, and did Alice in Wonderland with Sherman Hemsley and Mr. Jefferson. And if anybody's seen, by the way, the movie Raising Arizona, did you guys see that movie?
I've seen that movie.
Brothers?
That's a good movie. That's a fun movie.
I don't know if you know this, but I played the mother of the quintuplets, Florence, Arizona. and ironically, and I do not believe in coincidence anymore, and this is one of the coincidences, it came out 10 years before the mass sighting in 87. And somebody came up to me a few years ago, and I hadn't watched it since the 80s, and said, there's a reference to your character, Florence, Arizona, and UFOs. I said, really? I didn't even remember. I go back, and actually in the film, after one of the, and it's a black comedy for anybody that hasn't seen it, a cult favorite, and really a incredible, fun movie.
It's a pretty early Coen Brothers movie.
Yes, it was their second movie, actually. Their first movie was Blood Simple, and this was their second movie. And it starred Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter and John Goodman and Frances McDormand and William Forsythe. I mean, what a cast. And they were all starting. I think Nick was the only one that had done some films before. And at any rate, after Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter can conceive, they figure the Arizona family had quintuplets. They can they won't miss one of them. So they kidnap one of the quintuplets. And again, this is a black comedy. And after the baby was kidnapped, they have a press conference in front of our home, which is actually Jacoki Inn for anybody that knows Phoenix, at the Phoenician Resort. It's a beautiful inn. And standing in front of it, one of the reporters sticks a microphone in my husband's face and says, there's a rumor that your son was abducted by UFOs. Is there any truth to that? And my husband says, oh, please, son, please don't print that. If his mama reads that, she'll lose all hope. Which, by the way, is totally opposite from my take on the Phoenix Lights and these phenomena, which we'll get to. But the other ironic thing is that the cinematographer, who also was just getting started at the time in mainstream films, went on to do Big and When Harry Met Sally and The Addams Family and so forth. And he also, which is really interesting to me, talk about a little coincidence, actually created and directed the Men in Black series, Barry Sonnenfeld.
Yeah.
Is that bizarre?
Okay.
But anyway,
It
putting all that aside.
Just one little thing about that movie you didn't mention. Tex Cobb, who lived for a while in Philly, is in that movie as well.
Yes, Tex Cobb.
He plays the hunter, I guess, the guy who hunts down Nicolas Cage.
The motorcycle guy who hunts down the baby as well. And it's a really fun movie for anybody that hasn't seen it. But that was kind of ironic, and that was 10 years before the mass sighting that happened to be part of the movie. But at any rate, jumping forward to 95. without any interest or knowledge. And actually, I stayed away from the topic, to tell you the truth, the UFO topic, because of all the scary stories out there, and I was so busy. By then I had produced an AIDS and teen pregnancy and substance abuse prevention education videos that have won all kinds of awards with, as I mentioned, kids that had been there to tell their stories, experts in the field. And I have Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and the original cast from Beverly Hills 90210 and Paula Abdul and a whole host of wonderful celebrities that shared poignant messages to wake kids up to the reality of these things. Discovery Education has been distributing them for decades. And when this fell in my lap, literally and figuratively, my husband, who's also a physician and a healthy skeptic, I have to add that, was standing at our window, and we lived mountainside, just so you can picture it. And if anybody's near a computer and they want to get on the Phoenix Lights Network website, www.thephoenixlights.net, which is packed with information. If they want to explore and consider what's on there, I welcome anybody to come there, because there is so much data on there to enjoy and learn. And anyway, what happened was that we live mountainside in Paradise Valley. If you go to the photo page, there's a very unique collection of 35 millimeter photographs that have been analyzed and authenticated by military and university optical physicists as true unknowns. But what happened was that one wall of our bedroom, and we're pretty high on the mountain, so we have a panoramic view of the city skyline, and you can see one of the pictures on the photo page shows the topography. And so we were very used to seeing planes and coming into Sky Harbor International Airport and helicopters and streetlights and car lights and so forth. Well, it happened to be the night before, the eve of my birthday, February 6th. My birthday is February 7th. And I was in the other room taking a nice warm bath. And my husband was standing at one wall of our bedroom as a window. So we see whatever pops up out there. And he happened to be standing there talking to his mom. My mother-in-law called to wish me a happy birthday from Philadelphia, where I was, born and raised. And all of a sudden, and he's on several medical boards and hospital boards, and never one to be ruffled about anything, was very alarmed. He says, "Oh my God, what the hell is that? Get over here quick." And I jump out of the bath with a towel in my hand, wringing wet, and literally below us, about 50, 75 feet off the desert landscape, which is very treacherous and loaded with cactus and all that, behind the home underneath us was actually 3 orbs. And I call them an orb because the light did not extend outside the edge. And in a pyramid formation, one on top and 2 closely aligned underneath. And immediately, coming from a video background, I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to get a picture of this. But my video camera was downstairs. I didn't want to miss anything. And you'll hear that over and over again, guys, that when people see something totally extraordinary, they're stuck there. They're in awe and they don't want to move. And I try to take everything in mentally. The size, the shape, the color. They were about 3 to 6 feet each, depending on how close they were. They were orbs, again, because the light did not extend outside the edge. It was self-contained, and it was a very uniform amber light. And you will hear, again, people that see these phenomena called the Phoenix Lights, and one similar to them, will call them amber. Like, they're not yellow, they're not orange, they're amber. It's just the name that pops in your head. And they were actually oval shaped, like an egg on its side. And there were 3 distinct objects. I mean, I really took everything in that I could mentally. And I thought, and that the other thing was that they didn't glare. Every other light out there glared. House lights, street lights, car lights. These did not glare. They were very soothing, very mesmerizing. And I thought, if I don't get a picture of this, nobody's going to believe it. And I go running to the closet to grab my 35 millimeter. And thank goodness that was what I took these pictures with, because they're in the negative. It cannot be denied. And I collect sunsets. So I had it handy right there. And I go running to the closet to grab my camera. And by the way, there's 2 amazing sunset shots on that photo page. If you go to the bottom, they're the last 2, where I also caught a month apart in the same location these giant rod-shaped craft that have been seen not only throughout Arizona, particularly up at the Navajo Nation. I'm working with Navajo Rangers now, who are actually studying and law enforcement that's taking this seriously. But they're pretty interesting. I didn't see these objects when I took the picture, but they're in the negative. Anyway, I go to grab my camera, and my husband calls me back. He says, "Get over here quick! One of them is disappearing." And as we watched in sheer awe, the top orb, and it's so hard to describe logically, but it started to shrink very, very slowly. The only thing I could liken it to, and other than Star Trek and E.T. and Close Encounters, because we have two boys at the time, the thought that went in my head was, do you remember how the Romulan cloaking device would like waver before it disappeared? Right. Well, these didn't do that. I just really took note of that. It seemed like it was shrinking, but it didn't budge from the other two. It was like it was shrinking and fading like a dimmer light until it was gone, but it felt like it was still there, even though we didn't see it. Where did it go? Okay, I go out on the balcony. I shoot a quick picture of the two lower orbs, and that picture is on the photo page on the Phoenix Lights Network website. And immediately noticed an eerie silence, as if time had stopped. I always go back to this first sighting in '95 because it's as real as I'm talking to you now. I mean, this was so bizarre, as if time had stopped. And as intently as I'm watching the two lower orbs, and I did not admit this to anyone until 2 years later, when I finally admitted to Jim Delatosa, one of the chief investigators after the mass sighting, that going through my mind at that moment, because as intently as I was watching these two lower orbs, it felt like something was watching me. And I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you. And the next thing I remember, something told me to take a picture. And as I'm ready to take the picture, the left bottom orb started to shrink very, very slowly, mechanically, as if there was an intelligence behind it. And I quickly shot a picture of that. That was the only one that turned out at the time. But for me, it was unbelievable that I happened to catch this one orb, the left bottom orb, half disappeared and one still there, which verified to me that something strange did happen. I caught it on 35 millimeter, but I didn't know anybody that was into the topic. I didn't even know who to show it to. And I just wondered, and I'm a pretty educated person, and I knew nothing about this topic at all, what this advanced technology was doing outside our bedroom window, particularly, and I have to note this, since we lived nestled in the mountains, it's a no-fly zone. And so there's definitely no chance that it was military. But very interestingly, if you go to those pictures, and I did find it out after we started to investigate it 2 years later, that I had more pictures on those strips from the close sighting. And I ended up sending the first and the last picture to Dr. Bruce Maccabee. And this is getting a little ahead of myself, but I think it's important to share this here because, again, I always go back to this close sighting because I don't know, if something did happen, because what I shared with you is what I remember. And I don't remember going inside. I don't remember looking at the clock. What I share with you is what I remember. But the pictures themselves, I sent to Dr. Bruce Maccabee, Navy optical physicist, very well respected in the field, in the UFO field, as well as, in the military.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And and he gave me a call a couple weeks later. And this was like an afterthought, by the way, because the lights not only appeared on March 13th, which we'll get to, but they were appearing for weeks before. And then they appeared again a year later. And we have that video from 4 different vantage points in the documentary that people can take a look at. And I sent the 4 copies to Dr. Maccabee. And as an afterthought, I sent the first and last picture to him. And he called me a couple weeks later and he said, "You told me that the close sighting was only a couple minutes." I said, "Right." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "That's what I remember." He said, "Ask your husband." Well, interestingly, as a little aside, he would never talk about it. Now, he was inside, I was outside. And as I said, he's one that would never be ruffled about anything. But every time I brought the close sighting up, he would get agitated and didn't want to talk about it. So I stopped talking about it.
Right.
To me, it was wondrous and awesome and whatever. I mean, I just, it was just still in awe and always looking up at the sky to see if I saw anything similar, which I didn't for 2 years. But at any rate, I sat my husband down because Dr. McAfee said, look, you have to corroborate with him since he saw it too. And I said, look, we're not going to talk about this close sighting, but just tell me how long you thought, remember it being. He said, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes tops. I said, fine. I go back to Dr. McAfee. And again, if anybody's on the web, it's really interesting. If you can look at the pictures, you'll see, because again, they're 35 millimeter and it's on the negative. It cannot be denied. He says, first of all, the same phenomena. This is really poignant facts and data. The same mile-wide phenomena that I would also catch on 35 millimeter and then on video on 35 millimeter 2 months before the mass sighting, and we'll get to that in a second, and during the mass sighting on video was in the background in the same exact location as 97. That was one thing. I would have never noticed it. I just thought it was part of the landscape, but it's right there. I mean, the same exact phenomena. Plus, he said, look at this. Look at the skyline. And before I mention that, I want to just mention that during the mass sighting, people actually saw these orbs detach. I mean, the technology was incredible, which we'll get to. That detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it later. Is that what might have happened in 95? We can only speculate. But be that as it may, Dr. McAfee says to me, but the most important thing about these pictures, from the first picture to the last picture, is the skyline. I said, okay. He says, look at the skyline. In the first picture, there's many more lights that are on. In the first picture, and we're talking groups of lights that are off in the last picture. Yep. And he says, and we're talking many. We're talking at least a half a dozen or more. He says, that doesn't happen in a couple minutes. He says, I want you to do an experiment. And by the way, his 21-page report is on the website if anybody wants to read it. But at any rate, he says, I want to do an experiment and to go out to, approximately the same location that you were shooting at in 95 and shoot the skyline. And keep in mind that this is 3 years later, but he said, shoot the skyline one night every hour, the next night every half hour. And I actually did another night every 15 minutes to see when these lights, these groups of lights go out. Well, he analyzed the whole thing very meticulously. I mean, he is an incredible, incredible scientist. And what he came back with, by the way, he presented this case, and I did not share it until 2010 with the public, but because it's so bizarre. But he shared this case, and he asked me, can I please share this case at the Mufon, the upcoming Mufon 1999 International Symposium in Washington, D.C. And I said, Dr. McAfee, this is your baby. I would have never, ever noticed and realized this data unless you had analyzed it. I said, but please keep my name out of it. I stayed anonymous, and I mean anonymous, for 7 years. And he was kind enough, as were the handful of other people that knew the data that I had, that I was having analyzed, presented the case in 1999 as the first, if not the only, authenticated photographic evidence of missing time, that there were hours in between those pictures, not just minutes. And we can get to that later because
okay.
Again,
what is there a timestamp in the actual photos? Is that how you were able to figure that out?
No,
okay.
But he did this strictly by analyzing the skyline.
Oh, okay.
And again, you can read it, and I also have it in the latest edition of the book. How he analyzed this and the details of that. But I just wanted to interject this here because the 95 sighting was so unusual and so incredibly mind-boggling and powerful. And I have 35 millimeter photographs to confirm that it really did happen. That 2 years later, after not seeing anything even close to those close phenomena, I noticed 3 giant balls of amber light in a line formation, equidistant from each other, far west. Now, this was January 97. And I watched them for a while, and it started to sink in that, number one, they were huge and they were at a distance, but they were in a line formation equidistant from each other. They were amber. And as I watched, each one from right to left imploded, shrunk, just like 95. And I mentioned it to my husband, and he kind of blew it off. And the next night, he was at a medical board meeting, and it was about 8 o'clock, and I see the same 3 orbs now in front of South Mountain. And again, if you look at the picture of topography on the Phoenix Lights Network photo page, you'll see that the airport is just in front of South Mountain, which has red blinking lights on top of the mountain to alert planes coming into Sky Harbor that there's a mountain there. And I noticed immediately that these orbs were in front of South Mountain. They were lower than these red blinking lights. And I thought, okay, enough. I'm going to get video of this. And I run out front. I get about 18 seconds worth, and the battery goes dead. And it was charged. Okay, so I go inside. I hook up the battery. I go outside. They're gone. About a half hour later at 8:30, I go outside. I hear my husband coming up the drive, and I go outside, and I said, honey, remember I told you about those 3 amber orbs in a row, in a line, an equidistant line, last night, far west? Well, about a half an hour ago, they were right in front of South Mountain. As I'm pointing, they reappeared in the same spot. I kid you not. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to get a picture of this. Now, again, I don't believe in coincidence anymore, because in video, and it's very important to share this, in video, it does not do these lights justice. They're much smaller, they white, they flicker, very unlike the huge amber balls that people were seeing and that these were. But I go upstairs, I grab my 35 millimeter, I'm ready to take this 3. Suddenly, 6 lights pop on above the 3, massive span, over a mile wide. I started to shake. And if you look at the first picture of that series in January of 97, it's wavy because I was shaking. Not having an answer for 95. I mean, going through my mind is, oh my God, is this a mothership or a fleet? I mean, it was that unusual. But I kept clicking away, thank goodness, because the second picture, which is really important, is exactly what people would describe 2 months later during the mass sighting on March 13th, 1997, as 5 lights in a V formation, massive span, with 2 lights following. And if you look at that picture, it's the center one is really big, and then there's 2 lights on each side, 5 lights with 2, it looks underneath. That's exactly what people saw 2 months later. And then as I'm clicking away, as I'm catching this phenomenon head on, it starts turning to the right. And I caught it again. I mean, I caught these pictures as it was turning. Well, I have to admit, guys, that it was very unnerving. And the next morning, I figured, look, being the healthy skeptic that I am, there must be a logical explanation for this. Somebody else must have seen this. This was massive. And I called around, found air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport who saw the same thing. And they were very forthcoming initially. And we even had a briefing after the mass sighting, which is in the book. At the same time as I was shooting this, they were seeing this phenomena over Class B restricted airspace. Now, let me explain. There's a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport that anyone that goes into that airspace, particularly at 1,000 feet altitude that this phenomena was, must call into the tower, and no one did. So they got alarmed. And this was closer than that. It was like 5 miles out. They took the binoculars to look. And in their own words, this is what they described: 6 points of light, totally equidistant from each other, massive span over a mile wide that seemed to be attached to something. But they couldn't quite see what it was attached to, or as if there was a force field in between holding them in rock solid formation, which you would hear over and over again by thousands of people 2 months later during the mass sighting. And one of them was a meteorologist and knew what he was talking about and said it actually, this whole thing turned as a unit against the wind, elevated slowly in synchrony, and moved slowly behind South Mountain. So I said, so what were they? And there was silence. And then one of them said, beats me. I said, you're air traffic controllers. You're supposed to know it's in our airspace. They ruled out every conventional aircraft, balloons, helicopters, even skydivers and flares, by the way, and even skydivers with lights. They ruled out everything. Plus, another interesting aside, which just came to light a few months ago, and I actually have it in the book because 2 months later, during the mass sighting, which I'll get to details in a second, which is in itself mind-boggling, there was a pilot on approach to Sky Harbor, and I got video of these lights as it was happening, and he was about 5 miles out and called into the tower to say, what the hell are these lights over me? And I have that. They shared it with me. I have it in the book. Well, the person that this happened to, this private pilot, happens to be, and he just came forward a few months ago when his new movie, Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever, came forward, was actor Kurt Russell. Yes, and if you go to the news page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, you'll see the link that has his interview in UK, where they ask him about this, and he divulges for the first time that he was on approach with his son. His son was coming to Phoenix. They have a home here. And right in front of them were these lights. And he actually didn't even think about it until a couple years ago. There was a show about the Phoenix Lights on TV, and Goldie Hawn, who has been his partner for some years, was watching it. And he walked in and said, wait a minute, I saw that. And he went back to his log and actually looked it up. And that was him. He has all the information there from that night, which is another little interesting aside. But getting back to the mass sighting, 2 months later, after this happened, I continued taking video and photographs of these anomalous phenomena, as other people were, by the way. And Mufon, I should add, and I'll be presenting at the 2018 Mufon International Symposium, July 27th and 28th, Friday and Saturday.
In Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
In Cherry Hill, New Jersey. On Friday, I'll be presenting free for the public a 2-hour presentation, and people can come and see the pictures and all that good stuff. And I'm going to get into a lot more and how the media, how it unfolded through the media as well. And then on Saturday morning, I'm lecturing at 10:30 and then showing the documentary, our internationally award-winning documentary, The Phoenix Lights, Beyond Top Secret, the latest edition, at noon for free for anyone that's in the neighborhood. So I invite people to come there. But at any rate, as I said, I knew no one who was involved with this topic, and it was getting ridiculous. Running outside I just felt compelled to get these phenomena, these strange, mysterious, awesome phenomena on photographs and video. And finally, I thought, this is enough. I mean, I've got to find somebody to ask what's going on. And this is how close I was, guys. A friend of a friend had a neighbor who had a friend who knew the past president of Mufon, Mutual UFO Network. So I called him up and I said, look, I have a picture from '95 that I know is authentic, but I certainly would like someone of credence to take a look at it and tell me what it is. And I've been seeing these orbs in different formations that are really, really strange. And he hadn't heard about it, but there were other people that did get these lights on video. In fact, there was one, Steve Blunders, who called Mufon up to his balcony on March 13th, 1997. And while they were standing up there, suddenly this giant formation of 5 lights, and I always say the data speaks for itself. All you have to do is look at the video. Again, it doesn't do it justice. They're much smaller, they're white, they flicker. But the formation itself, these lights are rock solid in a V formation, in like an arrowhead formation. And they caught it on video on March 13th. Well, on March 13th, getting back to March 13th, because what this guy did was say, you know what, next week, I'm going to set up an appointment with you and a field investigator, which we had for Wednesday, the following week. The guy calls me up on Tuesday to say the then state director wanted to be at that meeting, but his mom had passed on Saturday and the funeral was Wednesday morning. Could we meet another day? And the only window of opportunity, talk about serendipity, The only window of opportunity I had for another 2-3 weeks was Friday morning at 10 a.m. He said, fine. I knock on his door. And by the way, the night before, I saw the same exact phenomena in the same exact location again and I caught it on video, which I was thrilled because I had the appointment with the guy the next morning, and called the air traffic controllers to see if they saw it. They saw the same exact thing in the same exact location, about 1,000 feet altitude over Class B restricted airspace. And also told me about this private pilot that called into the tower, which was Kurt Russell. And he says to me as he opens the door, did you see the mass sighting last night? And I said, well, I caught video of something similar last night to that I told you about, that I saw the same thing in the same location 2 months ago. And I told him my conversation with the air traffic control. He says, no, you don't understand. Hundreds, if not thousands of people saw these mild to larger. And we just found out, we had a whole big weekend because of the 20th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights in Oregon, McMinnville last year. And I found out for the first time after all these years, Peter Davenport, the head of the UFO Reporting Center, National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, shared that one of these craft, and I'll get to that, it was more than one, was 8 miles wide. 8 miles wide. That is mind-boggling. But at any rate, this guy says to me, hundreds if not thousands of people saw these mile wide, if not larger, V formations of lights, and some saw craft, and NBC was coming to interview him in a half an hour. I said, whoa. I said, I used to do health reporting for NBC here in the early 80s, and we're talking about 1997 now. But I said, they might recognize me, and I don't know, what we're dealing with, if it's a hoax or if it's military or whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's not about me. And I have to tell you guys, it's never been about me. It's about the data. And I said, take a copy of the video, share it with whoever you like. I'm out of here. And I left. Well, at 4:30 that afternoon, the very next day after the mass sighting, I'm sitting in front of my TV with my VCR ready to go. Every news station, that was the giant big news of the day, was showing my video. It was so bizarre. It was exciting because people were seeing what we saw. And my video is of the 3 endpoints of a giant V or triangle object over Class B restricted airspace. And by 9 o'clock news, a couple other videos came out. Steve Blunders with the Mufon Arrowhead video came out, and a giant boomerang shaped. Now, it's important to note here that my video and Steve's video were captured before 10 o'clock. There were 2 boomerang videos, and I have to say one of them is a little haphazard, so I've never used that in anything. But if you look at the Kristen boomerang, which has gotten the most publicity and also has been tried to be discredited as flares, which we'll get to, it's so impressive. It was like, oh my gosh, now thousands of people saw what I had been seeing. It was mind-boggling. I mean, it was exciting and mind-boggling, and just, I mean, it was just an awesome situation where starting the very next day, not only did I start keeping track of every report, and every day there was reports showing my video, by the way, for weeks on the news. They really covered it amazingly well, and they're a model for what should happen. But I started keeping a journal, a very intricate journal. I actually pushed aside my entire professional medical career to try to find a logical source of meaning for what I had witnessed and photographed, which I have yet to find, by the way. But every single day, I kept a journal of everything, of witness reports, of media reports, of anything I could get my hands on, and also started studying the topic. I wanted to find out what the heck was going on. And boy, did that open up a whole new world to me. I had no idea. In fact, a week later, after the mass sighting, I see my video on TV news again, but they're interviewing a fella who is showing from his vast database, because he happened to have a computer lab here in Tempe, where ASU, Arizona State University, is. And on the side, for like 20, 30 years, he was analyzing for the government and others pictures and video from other countries of the same exact phenomena. That was the first I heard of it, a week after the mass sighting, that these same phenomena were occurring in other countries. In the 90s, we're talking about UK and Belgium. Belgium actually is a model for what should happen. They came to the United States and asked, are we doing this? And the United States flatly denied that they were. And they joined forces with civilians and scientists and universities and the military to try to get to the bottom of it. That's what should happen. And I mean, it was just mind-boggling to me. Here I'm finding out that this is happening worldwide, and actually found out that a month before our mass sighting on March 13th, 1997, there was another mass sighting, but in St. Petersburg, Russia. And not only did air traffic controllers also see this phenomena and reported it over their tarmacs, but there were people that got video of the same exact different craft that I will share with you now, because what the general public came to learn from the media, which is very distorted and has, to me, it's mis and disinformation. And one of the reasons I finally decided to come forward after 7 years of anonymity was that there wasn't just one or two events on March 13th, 1997. Not only were these phenomena appearing for weeks before, but on March 13th, there were thousands of people that saw these mile to now we learn 8 mile wide craft, and there were 10 different craft. And if you go to the GAP page, GAP, Geospatial Animation Project, and look on the left side of the homepage, and you'll see GAP.
Doc, I've got that video saved, and what I'd like to do is run it when we wrap up.
Okay, that's great. But if you go to the GAP page, you'll see that the 12-year compilation from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, Arizona Mufon, Village Labs, as well as Frances Barwood, who we'll get to, Councilwoman Frances Barwood, who was the only elected official that innocently asked for an investigation in May, like months later, because so many of her constituents were asking her, why isn't there an investigation? We'll talk about that. But I wanted to get to some of the incredible technology of March 13th's phenomena. But anyway, after 12 years, and 2 or more people had to see the same craft, it was concluded that whether it was one craft that could morph into looking differently, whether it was perspective from where the person was standing, or an actual parade. And that's what I wanted to get to, because on March 13th, starting at 3 p.m. was the first daylight sighting in Arizona that was reported. 5 o'clock hour in New Mexico by Native Americans, 7 o'clock hour in California. In fact, at 8:30 that night, which was reported, and we have some of that video, the recorded report from an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base called the National UFO Reporting Center at 3 a.m. the next morning to report in very great detail that one of these mile-wide craft was hovering right over central Phoenix at 8:30, and military jets were sent out to intercept it, get gun camera film, which we heard that they did, and as they approached, the lights dimmed, and then the entire thing blinked out and disappeared, and which freaked out one of the pilots. He said that he helped one of them out of their aircraft. And by the way, there were civilians that saw this going on, and once the military left, the jets left, not only did Luke go on lockdown, but the phenomena appeared again and then continued. And this is what was so eerie to everybody, is that not only was it very low, like rooftop level, these phenomena, whether it was just lights that seemed to be attached to something in an equidistant array or actual craft. And people did see gunmetal. We have a pilot in the documentary that looked right into one of what he called a canister, a well of spinning energy that did not reflect out. It was all self-contained. And other people saw these orbs detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it later. Some people saw the wings actually fold in and then take off at blink speed without even dispersing the air. They were totally silent. That was what was so eerie to everybody, is that this gigantic, massive thing, whatever it was so low, and you couldn't hear a sound. And other people would see it not only take off at blink speed, but as I mentioned, disappear, as the military said. And we have one of the crafts split in two and then both shot up. I mean, we're talking about incredible technology that we have never seen in 21 years. Anyway, the sightings continued 11 o'clock hour, and I have that report in the book, which is really interesting. There were 2 commercial airline pilots that saw the same thing. This mile wide or whatever larger craft covered Las Vegas, and they tried reporting it, and their story in itself was really, really interesting. And then the sightings continued. Now, of course, the bulk, and this is what the media picked up on, the bulk of reports came in from 8 to 10 when most people were outside purposely looking up at the sky for a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was very clear in the northwest sky, and they also caught a glimpse of these incredible phenomena. So most of the reports came in during that time, but the phenomena continued all the way till 5:30 the next morning. The last report I have personally was contacted by a Boeing crewman who was coming into work with his crew and saw one of these crafts hovering over the tarmac. So we're talking not 1 or 2 events, not 1 or 2 hours, but many hours and over a dozen hours and many, many events happening at the same time. And that's what the investigators did this 12-year study, concluded that there was a parade happening throughout Arizona. And I have to also mention, really important, and we'll get to the consciousness and how it affected people in real time and long term after I give a little unfolding of what happened after this. But it's really important to note that in 21 years, over 21 years now, there has not been one credible report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. Can't speak for other things, but they have been happening since human documentation began, not only in Sumerian writings in the Bible, and then we see the same phenomena in frescoes in the 15th and 16th century. And of course, during World War II, we heard about the Foo Fighters, the same exact thing. Richard Haynes analyzed Haynes, who was the head of NARCAP and interviewed thousands, actually, of pilots who saw this. And during World War II, they called them Foo Fighters, the same exact orbs, these rock solid formations in 2s and 3s, like my husband saw outside our window in '95, were flying around aircraft, and each side thought the other side had this advanced technology. But after the war, when they tried to find out who had it, nobody did. And to this day, they have never, discovered who did this. I mean, even in 100 years before our mass sighting, in 1890s, which is really interesting, Washington and Canada, of massive airships with removable lights in the newspaper. And that's what they reported. Sound familiar? Well, this was 6 years before the Wright brothers took flight. And then we fast forward to the Lubbock Lights and of course the UK and Belgium sightings and Stephenville, as you had mentioned earlier, in 2008, very similar. I mean, this has been going on for many, many, many centuries. And there's another little aside, if I can share. 6 months before the mass sighting, and this is really important for the listeners to learn about, because this was the first I had learned about it, and it's pretty intriguing. 6 months before the mass sighting, I was invited to present my substance abuse prevention education program at the Gila Bend Indian Reservation. There's one schoolhouse there at the time, and there's a basin in between South Mountain, which is just south of the airport, and then a few miles back is the Estrella Mountain Range. And again, there's a basin in between those two where the very sacred ground of the Gila Bend Indians. And they actually don't talk to outsiders. I presented my program and helped them out with their substance abuse problems. And after the mass sighting, if you go to the photo page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, you'll see in the topography where South Mountain and the Estrella point in the middle. And that's where their sacred ground is, in between. And I noticed that my pictures were showing these popping up in that area. So I called them up after the mass sighting and I said, did anybody happen to see strange lights on March 13th? And they started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? And they said, are you kidding? We've been looking up at these for centuries. We call them sky people. Light, part of their culture. I had no idea. This was the first I heard it. And, boy, did I find out that native cultures, indigenous cultures, not only welcome these phenomena, the Hopi right here in Arizona and others have protocols to invite them in. And many of the indigenous peoples feel that these orbs, especially, are a spirit world coming to give them guidance and comfort and inspiration. And I have to say, I certainly have been inspired by these orbs to do what I'm doing. I would have never chosen to do this, but be that as it may, that's an interesting aside, because not only do native cultures welcome and feel that these phenomena are really important, and we're connected to these phenomena, which I'll get into a little later. But that's just an interesting aside that happened to happen because of my meeting 6 months before the mass sighting. Anyway, after the mass sighting, the story unfolding is intriguing in and of itself, because here thousands, and we're talking over 10,000 people for sure.
Right. Oh yeah.
Saw
Absolutely.
these. Oh yeah. Saw, if not 20, because I mean, through the years I have been contacted by so many people, and we have an event every year that I host at the Scottsdale Harkin Shea Theaters. Has been sold out ever since our documentary was premiered there in 2000. Every year and ask if they're different people, and I'm talking over 10,000 people saw these phenomena on March 1997. And yet, and this is low, I mean, just the public safety, nothing from the government or the military for months. And they mentioned official that innocently asked for an investigation as a public service, public safety issue, was Councilwoman Frances Barwood, and she was nailed to the wall by the print media. There was much harassment and ridicule and criticism and discrediting going on. I was very happy to stay anonymous and do my homework for 7 years, because it wasn't pretty at that time.
Happening in all this was the famous Fife Symington press conference.
Oh yeah, well I'll get to that because this is really what's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, Frank, because there was nothing until June 18th, 1997, front page USA Today article with a picture that Tim Lee had drawn of what he saw that night, of the V shape with 5 lights, opened our sighting for the first time outside of Arizona, worldwide. We were deluged overnight. We didn't have social media at that time, and it went viral overnight. By the next morning, I mean, people were traveling from all over the world to come to talk to the witnesses, and their reports were so detailed and so heartfelt. They too were saying, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation? Very interestingly, for the first time, we get this announcement in the morning, the very next morning on June 19th, that then Governor Fife Symington was calling a press conference, an unscheduled press conference for that afternoon, the next day, to divulge, and this was after the USA Today article, to divulge the culprit of the lights over Phoenix, which I was thrilled. I mean, I wanted to find out what the heck was going on here.
Right.
And a lot of other people took it really seriously. And he comes marching out, one of his aides, in a giant alien head costume, and made a mockery of the whole thing, which was, I have to tell you, really, really disconcerting, especially for the witnesses, especially those parents that were with children and had this thing that was as big as 2 giant malls go right over their head, and he's making a joke out of it. Well, it did put a lid on it, but I have to tell you, that didn't stop me from investigating, because I have the conversations in my book. They were very comical. When I started calling, and I tried to get as high up as I could of military in the bases around Arizona, Luke Air Force Base, David Monson, and so forth, and the Air National Guard. And their conversations were very interesting in that month period after the USA Today article. They were just as curious as we were what was going on. In fact, one of the higher ups that I talked to said the only one who knows who did this was God and whoever did this. I mean, that was his answer. Okay. Interestingly, I get a call on July 24th from one of the heads of PR at the Air National Guard. And she says, oh, Dr. Lynne, I think we know what those lights were back in March. And I said, that's great. What were they? She says, do you believe that nobody ever looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard, and the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off flares, military illumination flares, in Operation Snowbird, which I later found out, by the way, in military terms means diversionary tactical maneuvers. So I have no doubt. And they knew, I mean, if they sent jets out from Luke Air Force Base to try to intercept this thing at 8:30. So they knew what was going on.
Right,
so I have no doubt that flares may have been deployed to divert attention away from the true unknowns, but that's not what over 10,000 people saw, I assure you.
Right. Yeah, that's
Okay,
part of what they do. They get their own gear up in the air, and that's part of the protocol. They do.
There you go. There you go. But anyway, she says that must be what some people saw. That's exactly what she said. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, when was the Maryland Air National Guard in town? She says, March 1st to the 15th. I said, were they in town in January? She said, oh, no. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely not. I said, well, I happen to have 35 millimeter photographs of the same exact phenomena in the same exact location in January as March 13th, confirmed both in January and the morning after the mass sighting by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport as hovering over Class B restricted space, 1,000 feet altitude. And she says, you never told me that. And then I said, well, wait a minute. And you're trying to tell me, and I had educated myself to military flares, anything logical by then.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to tell
plus you've got Kurt Russell on this one.
Well, yeah, but I said, you're trying to tell me that military illumination flares that cannot keep a formation, they drift and drop with the wind, they're on parachutes, they have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself, which not one person witness to the true unknowns divulged or reported. And you're trying to tell me that these lights in rock solid formation, equidistant from each other, over a mile wide, traverse the entire state for hours? And she says, I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you. Well, I'm still waiting, guys. Okay, 21 years later. At any rate, at that point, it was really disconcerting. In fact, right after her call, I called my sister-in-law in Delaware to wish her a happy birthday. Her birthday is July 24th. The first thing she says to me, and it hasn't even been announced here yet, the first thing she says to me is, oh, I just saw in the news that they discovered what the lights were back in March. They were military illumination flares. They were showing this back east before it was even announced here, which was the next morning. The headlines were the Phoenix lights were flares. Okay. And that has been the only explanation that ever came forth. And I had to wonder through the years, why? How did this happen? Well, and people ask me all the time. And first of all, it's a logical explanation that those that can't deal with this topic, and I have to say, I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm just sharing the data. People can decide for themselves. It is what it is. And some people can't deal with this. Some people don't want to, and that's okay. That's okay. Everyone in their own time. But now at least there's data that people can look at. And that's what I felt was important. Because again, I pushed my whole medical career aside for 7 years. I've actually pushed it aside now for 21. But at the time, for 7 years to find out what was going on. And here, they're telling us that it was flares. And I realized that they could blow off and discredit people's reports, which, by the way, the only report, and Councilwoman Barwood says this in the film, the only report out of over 1,000 that she received was from a teenager, and I have all the respect for teenagers. I work with them, and my specialty is adolescent medicine. But this teenager reported that he looked through his telescope and saw planes, okay? And that's what the media reported, that was planes, which was ridiculous, but be that as it may. And now they're saying that it was flares. Well, the point is that the only hard evidence that they had to debunk, because the videos themselves, if you really look at them, okay, and again, it's very easy to mistake them for flares because the lights are much smaller, they're white, they flicker, but the formations themselves are so compelling. I'm sorry, those lights are either attached to something or, I mean, part of a craft or have a force field in between, but they had to debunk the videos. There's only a handful of videos. Now you have to remember, and people ask me this all the time as well, why weren't there more pictures? Well, first of all, cell phones were real clunky at the time. They had just come out and they did not have cameras in them. So who carries around the camera? I mean, the four of us that did take video from different locations. Mike Kristen happened to be filming cleaning his camera when it was happening. Steve Blonder was up on his balcony with Mufon when it happened. I had my camera in the corner of our bedroom because of all the sightings I was seeing. So we happened to have our cameras. So there is a handful of videos, but that's the only thing that they had to debunk. So whoever came up with the flare thing was brilliant, I have to tell you, because they could easily, the video, but the 35 millimeter could not. Okay. As the story unfolds, now, when they came out with the flare theory, that really, put a blanket over the whole thing. And many people fed into that because it seemed so logical. Okay. Well, interestingly, 3 years after the mass sighting, Councilwoman Frances Barwood was then running for Secretary of State of Arizona on a platform to get answers for the Phoenix Lights. She had so many of her constituents that were so angry that they came out with this flare thing and were blowing it off. And she also was asking for a reenactment, which was the logical thing. And right. Again, I'm open to it. Show me. Okay, show me. I'm open to a logical explanation. Well, if you go on the news page on the Phoenix Lights Network website and go about the middle of the page, and there's a block that says AZ Family, which is .com, which is a CNN affiliate, actually took video that night of their attempted flare drop, because we got an announcement on March 7th that they were going to be sending off flares, 3 Air National Guards, I believe it was New York, Michigan, and California, to show everyone the Phoenix Lights. Okay, show us. Well, it was, talk about a joke. It was so lame, and they tried to make a triangle was upside down. I mean, you can see, look at the video. They tried to make a triangle was upside down. It fell apart immediately, had huge smoke trails, just what flares do. Talk about putting a nail in the coffin for that explanation, because any of the witnesses that saw the real deal knew immediately that that was not the Phoenix Lights. And they have, to this day, have never been reenacted or explained. And by the way, just a couple years ago, and that's another video we have on the news page, a fella who has state-of-the-art technology took the Boomerang video, which is the only one. My video has actually been confirmed as a true unknown by the air traffic controllers, by Dr. Bruce Maccabee and others, University of Arizona, Brooks Institute of Photography, because it was over Phoenix and the air traffic controllers saw it. I mean, it is what it is. But the Boomerang, which happened after 10 o'clock, has really come out under fire ever since they came out with the flare thing for being flares. Well, this guy took the Boomerang video and put it in a stabilization video in slow-mo, and shows unequivocally, not only do these lights not change formation for a few minutes, but one of these lights separates and actually elevates and breaks in two. I mean, flares don't do that, okay? So we've pretty much put the flare theory to rest. So, and by the way, the craft that people saw, the 10 different craft that people saw, the craft was never addressed by the military or the government to this day. And as you mentioned, getting back to Governor Fife-Symington, right after the 10th anniversary, and I don't know what possessed him to do this, after he had mocked the sighting and debunked it in 97, he came forward to disclose that he actually he witnessed one of these craft. And as an awarded military pilot, he said that it was definitely not flares, but that it was otherworldly. Interesting. Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here. Oh, okay. Just...
No, I wanted to stop there because the next phase, and James had brought that up because he's read the book, is how the Phoenix Lights affected people in real time and long term, and the connection I found between all all unexplained phenomena as I was, doing my inquiry and keeping an intricate journal every day, and ending up with a 750-page journal that I ultimately condensed to 250 pages. And it's now in its third print, and I keep adding because this story keeps evolving as the years go on, with such intriguing data and more credible people. And that was one of the reasons I came forward to say, hey, I don't know what these things are, but I know that they are. And that it's time we get this out in the open, address it, accept it, and study it so we can find out not only who's driving these things, but certainly move forward in our own evolution. And that's why I finally came forward, and also as a physician, to let people know that they're not alone. I mean, most anomalies can be explained. Only a very small amount, maybe 5-10% at most, cannot. But just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, it doesn't mean they're not real. We may just be looking on an AM dial for an FM frequency. So it was important for me, not only as a scientist and as an experiencer, and certainly as an educator, to get the facts out and let people decide for themselves and learn what really happened here. But certainly as a physician and as an experiencer, knowing how it affected me and getting back to how it affected other people. What was really interesting, and we have a section of the documentary, if I can, that talks about how the media and Hollywood has portrayed these phenomena over and over again in a fearful content, in a threatening content. And Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is the head of the Consciousness Study Department at the University of Arizona and actually wrote the introduction to my book, says very poignantly in the documentary that you're so inundated with this threat, and harm. How do you think people are going to react if they see something as massive and strange as the Phoenix Lights? Well, what was really interesting is that did not happen. People were in awe, in wonder. In fact, 6 months before the mass sighting, the movie Independence Day was really popular.
Yep.
And children, and that's another interesting aside, were usually the first ones to see this mile or larger V formation of lights coming towards them, and we're jumping up and down, Independence Day. But as it got closer, a calmness came over everyone, adults and children alike, a connectiveness to the phenomena that once it passed, the kids wanted to run after it or have their parents get in the car and chase it. People were in awe, and you hear it over and over again, in wonder and amazement. And some people felt blessed that they had the opportunity in their lifetime to see something so incredible. And talk about long-term. We have people that, and I'm still hearing from people, by the way, and I'm hearing from a lot of retired military and pilots now who saw similar phenomena or were here at the time, to confirm that this was not anything earthly that we know of. And we certainly haven't seen any technology that comes close to this. And with the precariousness of what's happening in the Middle East and around the world, you would think that we would have seen some kind of inkling of this technology if we had it. But be that as it may, they changed their eating habits. Some of them don't eat meat anymore. Other people went into the peace movement, the environmental movement. It just woke people up. Whoever did this not only wanted to let us know in a very, very gentle, non-threatening way. Again, no one was harmed or threatened or abducted, that they're here, that they're real. And it also woke people up at a very, very deep level. And let me explain that a little bit, which I do get into the book very simply. A number of the witnesses shared with me that they had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the Phoenix Lights mass sighting, which I found really powerful and poignant because I did too when I was 8 years old. And I won't get into it now. I'm not going to be a spoiler, but I did have a very profound change of life experience when I was 8 years old, confirming that we are not alone. Okay, be that as it may, which may have been the foundation. I've been asked many times, and I leave it open. Again, the healthy skeptic in me, but may have been the foundation for what happened when I saw the 3 orbs outside my bedroom window the eve of my birthday. Be that as it may, I thought, geez, could there possibly be a connection between all unexplained phenomena be it near-death experience, out-of-body experience, or unexplained aerial phenomena that have a mystical light associated with the experience. And lo and behold, when I started looking, and that's what I urge people to do, just look. If you really look for credible data, it's there. The Omega Project, which was like a 4-inch book at the by Dr. Kenneth Ring at University of Connecticut, just that's what he did. He compared these near-death experience, out-of-body experience, unexplained aerial phenomena, and found not only a connection, and Dr. John Mack of Pulitzer Prize-winning Harvard fame also came to the same conclusion. Not only is the experience, I lay out very simply in the book, whatever the unexplained phenomena experience is, very, very similar. And I began calling all unexplained phenomena an up, because it is an up, the positive awakening. And this was what really got me. And I know personally what happened to me. I mean, my life is a picture of what happens to someone who has an unexplained phenomenon, up experience. Just being aware that there's so much more out there in the universe, that we're not alone, that we're connected. We're all connected to the earth, to the universe, to each other in such a profound, important way, and that we're spiritual beings. And I'm not getting into the woo-woo. I'm talking about the reality of how we as human beings can make this world a better world and do good for this earth and for each other, which I only wished would happen at this time in our history. But the people that have had true up experiences, or you don't have to have an up experience to have this positive transformation. All you need to do is learn about it, have an open mind and an open heart, and learn about it. And you start to see, if you really open your eyes and your heart, serendipities that start to happen that show you that there is so much more out there, and whether it's frequencies, vibrations, whatever. There is so much more out there in this wondrous universe. And let's be real, okay? Not only do we know now from the Hubble and the Kepler telescope and others that there are trillions of other galaxies out there that are older than our Milky Way galaxy. Plus, our solar system is a very young solar system. It's only 4 to 6 billion years old. There are scientists now postulating that there could be intelligent, sentient entities out there, billions of years ahead of us. That is just such a mind-boggling thought. And also, the reason that I ultimately shared the missing time data is not only to show that our concept of time, from my close encounter, that when it felt like time had stopped, that not only is time, our concept of time, primitive, past, present, and future, but that if there are other times and spaces along with ours, that now the string theory and bubble theory are postulating there are 10 or 11 different dimensions out there. So if there's other times and spaces along with ours, why is it such a leap to think that there might be other intelligences in those other times and spaces that we get glimpses of if we're open to them or invited?
Got it. Now, getting back to Symington, he did have that change of heart. Have you met this guy? Have you ever talked to him a little bit about what was with the press conference, the silliness there, and then his change of heart later on?
That's a really good question, because I have tried. I have tried a number of times. It's very, I don't know why he has not. I have reached out to him numerous times. I have gotten him the book and the documentary. And by the way, once the book came out in 2004, and I had gone back to work as the chief clinical consultant at the Arizona Heart Institute for a few years to help put our younger son through medical school. He's a neurologist now. I was just amazed at the doctors and the nurses that would come up to me and start telling me their stories of their unusual paranormal or UFO experiences. There's millions of people out there that have had near-death experiences, have seen strange things in the sky. Again, most can be explained. But what was really interesting is that the response to my work, I wanted to get, once he came forward in 2010, because in 2005, after being pursued by a number of filmmakers while I was at the Arizona Heart Institute working full-time 7 to 7 and then doing radio programs like this Into the Night and Barnes & Noble and Borders tours for the book. On the weekend, I was also being pursued by filmmakers. I had no time. I wanted to do something visually. And finally, one of them, Steve Lance, who had graduated from the Brooks Institute of Photography and his parents lived here, his father is a doctor, said, I'm coming with my equipment and we're starting to film in May. I said, wait a minute. I said, first of all, I stayed anonymous for 7 years. I don't know if people would want to come forward. I understand that. I mean, people, and I take confidentiality as a physician very seriously.
Sure.
And for anyone that wants to contact me, it's really important when you have a paranormal experience to share it with at least one person. It's very cathartic because if you don't, it festers and it's not healthy. So just sharing with one other person. And again, I get emails or messages on Facebook, the Phoenix Lights Network Facebook page every single day. And it's important. And I'm happy to be there for people to just let them know that they're not crazy, that they're not alone, that there's a lot more data out there that they can explore. But at any rate, the fact is that after I started, he came with his equipment, every single person that, and I tell you, university professors can lose their grants if they mention the word UFO at the time. But every single one, including the head of the optical sciences department who worked on the Star Wars program for the president, is in the documentary. And I thought, okay, that's a sign. Plus the fact that some parents, and this is another project that I just finished actually, because I'm working on a curriculum, and we'll be talking about that at the 2018 Mufon International Symposium in July. They invited me to a school here, which was like, whoa. I mean, they'll actually let me in the door to talk to a middle school about this topic. And I to 200 middle school students in this auditorium, and there were teachers and parents there. You could hear a pin drop. They thirst for this knowledge. And it was the first time that I realized, oh my goodness, I mean, there is nothing in our history books about this topic. And that really pushed me. It was like a big sign to say, I've got to do something visually. We started production. By July, it was like, I had to make a choice. And in July of 2004, I left my job and went on to finish a documentary. It was released in 2005. We won over a dozen international film festival awards, which is unheard of. And I welcome people. It's on Amazon. In fact, if you have Amazon Prime, I just want to get the information out there and let people decide for themselves. And hopefully they'll embrace the data and appreciate the hard work, not only myself, but so many other people have done. And actually, when I came forward with the documentary, I got the documentary and book to Symington, and he is in the documentary from an interview that he did on CNN. But I have yet to meet with him, and I don't know why. I just wanted to thank him, but he has really stayed in the shadows. It's very hard to reach him and to interview him these days. But I'm very grateful, and I think it was very brave for him to come forward.
Better late than never.
Yeah, at least let us know that he saw it and that it was, in his own words, otherworldly.
Now, John McCain was asked about the case in the immediate aftermath, and he talked a little vaguely about, well, people do have the right to know what's flying around in the skies. But have you ever heard anything about any kind of follow-up? Did he take any action? Did he do anything besides respond to a question during an interview about the case?
Good question. In fact, I tried to get in touch with him at the time, and this was before he was running for president. And I was kind of stonewalled myself. I mean, they wanted a lot of information. I didn't want to get involved. But Councilwoman Frances Barwood did. And she actually contacted him. He has said that he was stonewalled, but he got her letter. And he said he made a letter up and sent it to the National Archives. She talks about it in the film, which is just a repository for letters. Right. And that's about the extent of it. That's all he ever did that we know of. And Symington does say quite clearly in his interviews that he was stonewalled, that he tried to find out what was going on. So, but never, and he felt bad. I know he felt bad that he, at least he says he did, that he made a joke of it at first, and I guess it got the better of him. And after seeing that, people really appreciated and took my coming forward seriously, because the media here, and it's such a model for what should happen. Because going back again to the early 80s when I was doing health reporting, a lot of the people that I worked with at that time, who were underlings and just in production or whatever behind the scenes, when I came forward in 2004, were now the head of the news department at ABC, the head of production at Fox. I mean, they said, "You're Dr. X," which is what Village Labs called the person who had the video and pictures, Dr. X. They said, "You're Dr. Well, come on over," and they have been so kind and so credible. I mean, that's what's so important, to keep this credible, to just share the data and let people know that it's there, which I really appreciate you letting me do. And now, going back to the kids, I've been working on a curriculum for half a dozen years. For the 20th anniversary, I came out with a graphic novel activities coloring book for all ages. And this is really 21 years in the making, based on the Phoenix Lights. It's called Phoenix Lights, UFOs, and Crop Circles, Adventure of Sue, FO, Field Observer, and Hugh, 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 FO, and he's a little alien. I work with a Disney illustrator and amazing teachers and a map maker who actually took the study, the 12-year study, came out and took pictures and measured. It's amazing. This graphic novel is just packed with such incredible information. There's a black and white copy for only $9.99 on Amazon, and then there's a colored copy, which shows how you can color. It's really beautiful. But anyway, not only do we base the story on a true thing that happened, there were kids out playing baseball, and they see this V coming towards them, and I try to get both sides. I have kids saying, "Oh, it's balloons," and somebody saying, "No, it couldn't keep that well of a formation," and another person saying, "Oh, it's helicopters," and another kid saying, "No, it couldn't be. There's no sound," and on and on and on. And the next day it was the buzz at school, and Sue is really into it. And the teacher says, "Well, why don't you go to the History Museum and see if there's any kind of history of these phenomena?" And of course, we do a whole history section, and I actually got iconic pictures that people can draw underneath in there that are just amazing pictures, including a picture of a plane during World War II with Foo Fighters around it. And of course,
I think I've seen that picture.
Yeah, of course, we have the picture of the Capitol building in '52 with the same phenomena around the Capitol building and so forth. And we also show pictures of the difference between flares and the true unknowns, which is really powerful to just see it up close, because the true unknowns are so rock solid in equidistant formation, and the flares are haphazard with huge smoke trails. And then we have a whole section on crop circles, 80 beautiful, amazing crop circles. And I tried to pick the ones that were the most complicated, with geometric formations and so forth, the mathematical backgrounds to them, as well as activities. And we have crossword puzzles and word finders, and for all ages. And it's such a great thing. And what I wanted to do was help parents and grandparents to introduce this topic in a very gentle, informative way to their children and grandchildren, as well as themselves, because it's packed with information. And then we have the answers as well to all these incredible activities. The black and white copy is 150 pages, and the colored copy is 160 pages. And I welcome people to take a peek at that, because it's really amazing. And I'll have some of those, of course, with the book and documentary DVD, which has incredible bonus features. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell is in it, and in the bonus feature, not only is he in it in the regular movie, and he was being contacted. He was actually in real time contacted while the mass sighting was going on. And he also talks about the cover-up, which I do not address in the documentary, but he does in the bonus features, plus coincidences. Now, going back to coincidences, if I can just relay this real quick, there were coincidences on March 13th. Do we have time for me to share that?
Oh yeah, we've got all the time in the world. You said that you said you had an hour. And we got the time. I got one more question I really want to get in, but yeah, you go for it.
Okay, well, real quickly, the coincidences just on March 13th itself are pretty intriguing, because number one, a satellite that was built in Chandler, Arizona, and they reported this to Village Labs at the time, that was supposed to detect incoming missiles, went dead that night on March 13th, 1997. Second, months later in July of 1997 in Scientific America, they did not mention the Phoenix Lights, but they mentioned a whole article, multi-page article about strange gamma rays that came into our atmosphere on March 13th, 1997. Now, if you remember, then President Clinton, Bill Clinton, was down in Florida with the golfer Craig Norman, and what was the buzz was that he was rushed out from his house and actually supposedly broke his knee, and there's no pictures of that, to an undisclosed location. And the fourth thing, and to me this is just, speculation, but it was told to me by some insiders that we went to DEFCON 3 that night. So these are some very interesting coincidences that happened on March 13th. And with that, I just, want to share that, it's a joy being with you guys, and I hope this has been informative. And there's a lot more to this story.
Absolutely. Well, we got them warmed up for you. Well, you got them warmed up for you. But
I hope so. I hope so.
One question I really want to get in, though, is we talk about, I'm assuming this is an estimate, 10,000 witnesses, maybe 20,000 witnesses. But how many people would you estimate between you and anyone else who's compiled data on this particular case? How many witnesses would you say you've got on record? Anonymously, full names, full details, or just, yeah, I saw it? How many people do you think are on record as having witnessed this in one way or another?
I know myself that I have over 20,000 emails from people.
Oh, really? You have
Yes.
that many? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And as I
didn't
said,
realize that.
unless somebody tells me I can share, and we do have a share page on the website where people can, read very interesting reports that people have given me permission to share. And some of them are from military and pilots, so they can get a taste of, and certainly in the book and in the documentary itself, they'll hear from people firsthand. And we have military and pilots and nurses and detectives and some wonderful people that have shared, their stories. And it's very heartfelt and it's very detailed, and it is what it is. So
okay, yeah, I'm glad I asked, because I was figuring, well, they say 10,000, that's probably an estimate, but they probably in a big case like this, they might have a couple 300 people on the record.
No,
you're saying
no. In
okay,
fact, Frances Barwood, received over 1,000 herself, and this was just at the time. Okay.
Right.
And National UFO Reporting Center, and they've received thousands. You can go on their website and see for yourself, where people sent them pictures and drawings, diagrams, and so forth. I mean, it's thousands and thousands, and it's mind-boggling to me when I go out and about and I'm speaking about this. Inevitably, there's people in the audience that also saw it that I hadn't met before. So I mean, and certainly every year when we have our sold-out event at the Scottsdale Harkin Shea Theater around the anniversary time, that I ask, and there's thousands and thousands of people alone that I've through the years. I mean, we've been doing this since 2005. That have told me their stories. So personally, so
wow.
We're talking. I mean, at least 10,000 people.
Yeah. I didn't, like I said, I thought that was maybe an estimate, and there may be a few hundred that have actually provided some detailed account. But I didn't realize the number was that big. That's amazing. That's really amazing.
Yes, it is. It is. That's why it cannot be denied or explained to this day. And I hope one day we do find out, who is behind it. And I'm open to any logical explanation, but there is yet to be one.
Well, putting it in a doctorly context, they did no harm.
Well, that's the thing. And that was one of the important things for me to come forward to share with people, because, as I said, we're so inundated with fear and threat with Hollywood and the media that, how are people supposed to react when they see something so unusual? So hopefully, and again, I don't know what else is out there. I'm focusing on the Phoenix Lights phenomenon itself, and I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, it has been nothing but a joy and awesome and inspiring and just amazing, my entire journey. And of course, there are some people out there that can't deal with it, don't want to deal with it, or want to discredit. And that's very, very sad that people want to discredit the messenger, so they won't listen to the message. So I appreciate that you're letting me share the message, and I hope people seek out the website, which is totally free and packed with information, as well as the book. And in fact, the Kindle version, the latest edition, which I share another picture, which is mind-boggling, which actually, and I won't ruin it, I will not spoil it here, which actually prompted me, put the tail, the icing on the cake to prompt me to come forward in 2004. So I finally put it in the latest version of the book, the third edition. And the Kindle version, by the way, has colored pictures. It also has links, so people, I tried to put links throughout the book so people can explore other options. And it's only $9.99 on Amazon. So I've really tried to keep it at a very reasonable price. The documentary right now is not only the DVD is offered with incredible bonus features. We have a 93-year young French pilot who was actually a witness to the Foo Fighters, and he in World War II, and he tells his story and how he tried to report it and what happened to him when he tried to report it. It's very interesting. As well as a pilot, a commercial pilot, Vietnam pilot, who was right underneath one of these craft and looked into one of the wells, or the canisters, as he called it, and talks about how it could never be flares, and lots more, and the coincidences, and lots more in the bonus features. But we also have it offered if you have Amazon Prime for free, and at a very minimal rate if you don't have Amazon Prime. So people can take a look at it and decide for themselves.
And you're going to be in Cherry Hill, New Jersey towards the end of next month. I think there's a very good likelihood I'm going to be there myself.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah,
that's great.
I think so. I think so.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I hope so. I hope we finally get to meet, Frank, because we've been friends on Facebook for some years, and I also
I remember one of our first exchanges. I don't know if you do or not, but I kept telling you, just hang in there, because the stuff that I find is old stuff. Generally, the really interesting stuff, it's old stuff. It's been floating around for years. Nobody really found it and made a big deal about it, and that's kind of where I had some early success researching all this stuff. And I remember telling you, Dr. Lynne, you just hang in there, because more is going to be coming your way. I don't know in what form or what it's going to be, but that's the way it goes in this crazy UFO business. It doesn't all come out at once. It comes out in drips and drops, sometimes over a period of years and even decades.
You're absolutely right. In fact, like I said, I mean, my book's in the third print, the video is in its third version, and now we have the graphic novel activities coloring book, and with each new version or edition, there is every time there's new information, and we're just learning that the ingredients of life are out there, whether it's amino acids or oxygen and hydrogen and so forth. I mean, we're made of stardust. When a star bursts, these organic materials are sent all over the universe, and it's just to think that there is no other life out there, sentient life out there, is really limiting our mind and the possibilities. So, all I can say is that, the Phoenix Lights is what it is. It has evolved, as you said. New information keeps coming forward. Some people say, oh, it's such old news. Well, you know what? It's not old news at all. There's new news coming forward, like Kurt Russell, or like the Pentagon, finally,
exactly.
Coming forward, in the New York Times, admitting that there has been a $22 million study headed by, Henry Reed at the Pentagon for pilot and military. And that's all they're admitting to. And it's probably a lot more for many, many, many decades. New material comes out all the time. And I try to keep up with it. In fact, on the website, and then the Phoenix Lights Network page on Facebook, I usually post the most, as well as I just posted the poster and the fact that Travis Walton, if you've heard of him, the movie Fire in the Sky, which also, by the way, took what he feels was a benevolent contact and made it scary. But he'll be speaking also and showing his film at the Mufon International Symposium on Friday and Saturday, the 27th and 28th of July, so for free, as will I. So I hope that many people in the area will come visit us and hear the rest of the story, because there are a lot more that I could get into, but I'll let people enjoy it for themselves in the documentary and the book, and hopefully come and visit us. And I hope to meet you too, Frank.
Yep, yeah, 95. I would say 95+% chance I'm going to be there.
Excellent. I really
think so.
appreciate it.
Yep.
I really appreciate your time, and again, people can contact me either via the website. Contact is a link right at the top of the page, or through Facebook, because I love to hear from people and hear their stories, and I'm there for them.
And gather new data.
Yeah, and to let them know that we're not alone, and I urge people also, again, the unexplained phenomenon to keep looking up. It's a double entendre.
Yep. We're due for once a decade a case like this comes along, and we're due for another one.
Well, actually, this has been hailed. The Phoenix Lights has been hailed now globally as the most witnessed, most documented, and most important mass anomalous aerial sighting in modern history.
Yep. It got Phoenix pretty worked up. I can't think of another case that got a community as large as Phoenix. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense that.
Well, it's not just Phoenix; it's Arizona. And by the way, I should mention too that it wasn't just Arizona, as I mentioned earlier. It was New Mexico, California, and Nevada. Also, we're seeing the same exact phenomena over that dozen-hour period on March 13th that we were seeing throughout Arizona. So it's much more far-reaching, and there's a lot more intricate details in the book that I hope people will search out.
Absolutely, we covered a lot of ground, but I know that we didn't cover it all. So, Dr. Lynne, I think a very good chance I'll be seeing you in about a month or so over in Cherry Hill. Thanks for joining us. It was fantastic. This is the first time we've had the chance to have somebody on to talk about one of these more modern cases who was involved directly, witnessed yourself. Thanks for coming on. We got more coming up like this. I think John Burroughs is going to do our show next month. That's going to be good. These cases are interesting, and like I was telling you before we went on, they're cases because you guys are still out there. You guys are finding stuff out, and you're doing the research. So I kind of lay off looking at them too closely. But I learned a lot today. And thank you so very much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me on, and keep looking up. There's many things happening out there with an open mind and an open heart. And thank you again for letting me share.
Not a problem. You have a great day. And what I am going to do now is there is a video at the Phoenix Lights website that I'm going to play. It goes into some detail about how the site is kind of laid out, their map, the trajectory, a lot of details. So I'm going to run that now. We'll be done when that video closes down. I'm going to shut down the live stream, but I'm going to play that now and enjoy it. I think it's lays things out visually as well as just with some narration. So I'm going to run that now, and here we go.
This overview shows the ground paths of various unknown objects that traverse the skies over central Arizona in various locations throughout Phoenix between 8 and 9 o'clock p.m. on March 13, 1997. The object seen by the greatest number of witnesses over the longest period of time was described as a large V-shaped craft similar in shape to a carpenter's square, with wings swept back at a 60-degree angle and squared-off ends. There were 5 large lights equally spaced underneath the object, and a dome-shaped canopy on top. Tim Lee, a witness living near the Squaw Peak area, created this color illustration that was later featured on the cover of USA Today. Many witnesses described a similar object over 7th Avenue and Indian School Road, then watched it vanish as several fighter jets from Luke Air Force Base approached. After the jets passed, the object reappeared again, then proceeded towards South Mountain. This second craft did not have a dome on top, and was observed at a higher altitude. Other witnesses reported seeing a boomerang or V-shaped object with a 120-degree sweep and pointed tips flying over Lake Pleasant and the west side of Phoenix at a high altitude. Airline pilots reported that the object was well above their 18,000-foot altitude. Underneath the object were 6 sets of lights and 3 lights in each set. Another mile-wide V-shaped object with a 90-degree sweep was seen descending towards the approach end of the Sky Harbor Airport at an altitude of approximately 1,500 feet. A witness who observed the object less than 300 feet away reported that as it floated by in front of the moon, it appeared to be semi-transparent. There were 4 reddish amber lights along the leading edges and a red orb trailing behind the object. A 5th object was described by witnesses as a mile-wide black triangle. Some witnesses reported seeing lights in windows, and others did not. This massive black triangle was first observed near Scottsdale and Pima Road, traveling west. Then the object turned south along Interstate 51 and flew over Squaw Peak. It is believed that this particular object was the one former Arizona Governor Phi Simonton reported seeing as it traveled south towards Sky Harbor Airport. Another equilateral triangle estimated to be around 2,500 feet long had 3 white lights, one on each of the tips and 1 red light in the center. Witnesses first observed this triangular craft just north of the Beeline Highway, traveling southeast across Mesa, and was last seen near the intersection of Riggs Road and Power Road in Chandler. The craft then appeared to split into 2 identical copies that traveled away from each other in 2 different directions. Witnesses along Interstate 10 also reported seeing a mile-long black triangle traveling north from Casa Grande to Phoenix. The craft had 3 lights on the nose and 1 on each tip. It is not clear whether or not this particular craft is the same object that flew over Squaw Peak. There were also reports of an enormous white luminescent oval craft, estimated to be a mile long by 3/4 of a mile wide, with amber lights around its perimeter. The object was last seen hovering just above the ridge of the McDowell Mountain Range, northeast of Phoenix.